So welcome to today's deep dive. I'm your host.
And I'm your expert guide for this one. I'm really looking forward to getting into this.
Yeah, me too. So to start us off, I want you, the listener, to just imagine something for a second.
Okay.
Imagine being at your absolute lowest point.
Yeah.
Like you are standing on the edge of a precipice.
Yeah.
Either literally or metaphorically.
Great. The world has just gone completely dark.
Exactly. The weight of everything is just unbearably heavy. You can't carry it for one more second.
Yeah.
So in this final desperate act of, I guess, self-preservation, you pull out your phone and you dial a helpline.
You're just desperate for a beacon of hope at that point.
Right. A sympathetic ear,
Yeah.
somebody, just a stranger in the night to tell you that tomorrow's worth sticking around for.
You expect sanctuary.
Yes. You hear the line ring, someone picks up. But what if the voice on the other end of that line isn't actually there to talk you off the ledge?
Which is a terrifying thought.
What if that incredibly calm, soothing voice is actually there to gently, expertly push you over?
It is a premise that strikes at the absolute core of human vulnerability.
It really does.
Because it completely subverts one of our most fundamental, unspoken social contracts.
How do you mean?
Well, think about it. When you reach out for help in your most shattered state, you are entirely defenseless.
Right. You have no armor left.
Exactly. You are handing over your psychological well-being to a complete stranger, assuming that the institution they represent acts as a safety net.
Right.
So to find a predator waiting in that specific space, it's a primal kind of terror.
It is. And that profound subversion is the dark beating heart of today's deep dive.
Yeah, it's intense.
We are exploring the sources and the terrifying psychology behind The Good Samaritan.
By John Mars.
Yes, exactly. It's this masterful psychological thriller. And, his peers in the genre do not hold back in their praise for this one.
Oh, absolutely not. Lisa Jewell called it clever, twisted, and dark as mighty hell.
Dark as mighty hell. I love that description.
And Peter James praised Mars as being brilliant at twists.
Which is spot on. But we aren't just going to recount a scary story today.
No, we're really going to deconstruct it.
Right. Our mission is to look at the anatomy of a predator hiding in plain sight. We're going to examine the deeply destructive reality of raw grief.
And trace this twisted cat-and-mouse game between two people whose lives just collide in the worst possible way.
So, to even begin to understand how a collision like this happens, we have to look at the environment, right?
Yeah, the architecture of the setting is totally crucial here.
Right.
Mars places us in this fictional suicide helpline in Northampton. It's called End of the Line.
End of the line. Just the name itself is heavy.
It really is. And the core mandate of this charity is very specific. It's rooted in a real-world philosophy of extreme harm reduction.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice?
Well, the volunteers are there to listen without judgment. That is their absolute, unbreakable directive.
So they aren't offering advice?
No. They are not there to preach. They are not there to force interventions. And they certainly aren't calling the police to trace the calls. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, they are trained to allow callers to retain ultimate agency, to make their own choices.
Even if that choice is to end their life.
Exactly. They offer a non-judgmental presence up to the very last breath.
I can see the philosophical argument for that. On paper, it sounds incredibly noble.
It does.
It's about respecting human autonomy above all else, providing dignity when a person feels totally out of control.
And it requires immense empathy to sit with someone in that kind of pain and not try to fix it. Because fixing it is our natural human instinct.
Right, you want to jump in and save them.
But the chilling reality of this narrative is that any system built entirely on trust has a structural vulnerability.
And someone found it.
Yes. One volunteer recognized this specific vulnerability in that mandate. She has taken this strict policy of non-intervention and hijacked it completely.
She uses the very rules designed to protect the callers as a shield for her own agenda.
The deeply dark personal agenda.
So we have to talk about this volunteer. Her name is Laura.
Yes. Because before we can even begin to understand the catastrophe she causes, we have to get inside her mind.
We do.
And what is so striking to me, and frankly deeply unsettling, is how incredibly normal she appears.
Oh, she blends right in.
Right. When Laura arrives for her shift at End of the Line, she doesn't sneak in through the shadows. She arrives early.
With baked goods.
Yes. She brings freshly baked home-iced cupcakes in a tin for her colleagues.
She literally plays the role of the office mom.
The sources even mention she sews buttons back onto her coworkers' shirts. Who does that?
Well, it's no accident. It is the perfect, calculated camouflage.
How so?
Our brains rely on cognitive heuristics, basically mental shortcuts, to assess threats.
Okay, that makes sense.
So when you see someone performing maternal nurturing behaviors, baking, sewing, caring for others, your brain immediately categorizes them in the safe column.
So she makes herself invisible by being too nice.
Exactly. By playing the indispensable, harmless figure, she renders herself completely invisible as a threat. When people view you as the nurturing presence in the room, they stop analyzing your behavior critically. Their guard drops.
And a dropped guard is exactly what a predator needs, right?
Precisely. To operate freely right in the middle of a crowded room.
She just hacks their evolutionary psychology. It's wild.
Mm.
And that makes her choice of workspace within the office even more sinister.
Oh, her desk setup is fascinating.
Right. She claims this specific desk at the very back in the call room. It's right by a boarded-up Victorian fireplace.
Which gives her maximum privacy.
Yeah, nobody can easily walk behind her screen. Nobody can overhear her soft, calming telephone voice.
And she overwhelmingly prefers the evening and night shifts.
Which I assume is also a strategic choice.
Absolutely. From a psychological standpoint, nighttime is when the distractions of the daytime world just fade away.
Like work, errands, the noise of daily life.
Right. And for someone struggling with severe depression or suicidal ideation, the silence of the night can be deafening.
They're left entirely alone with their darkest thoughts.
The isolation is magnified. Laura knows this. She isn't just taking the shifts nobody wants.
She is optimizing her hunting hours.
Hunting. That is the exact word for it.
Because while she goes through the motions of helping everyday callers like Herv, she'll direct a pregnant teenager to talk to her aunt or listen to a pensioner talk about his garden. She's actually sifting through them.
Filtering.
Right. She keeps this secondary secret notebook hidden away, strictly for people she deems candidates.
These are the callers she assesses to be genuinely ready to die.
But she doesn't just encourage them to take their own lives. She manages the entire process.
Down to the smallest detail.
Yeah, the sources detail these terrifyingly meticulous 5 rules she has for her candidates. I'm still wrapping my head around the sheer level of control she demands.
All the control is the entire point for her. If we
Right.
break down those rules, you really see the mind of a highly organized psychopath.
Right.
Her first rule is absolute. She is in control. Always.
It's never a partnership.
Exactly. It is a mentorship where she holds all the authority. What stands out to you about the second rule?
The second rule is that the candidate must trust her absolute expertise. And the word expertise isn't an exaggeration here.
Not at all.
She actively researches the tensile strength of different types of rope. She studies lethal combinations of household chemicals.
She calculates exact drop heights from specific bridges to ensure fatality rather than just an injury.
Which really highlights how she views herself.
She does not see herself as an amateur enthusiast. She views herself as a specialist, an elite technician.
The sources say she actually attends public inquests into suicides.
She reads medical reports. She is a dedicated student of death. She approaches suicide with the cold, rigorous methodology of an engineer.
That's so creepy. Then there's rule 3. They have to do it within 5 weeks.
Right.
If they waver, if they hesitate, she just cuts them off completely.
She has no time for cold feet.
And rule 4 dictates that she handles all the nitty-gritty planning, the location, the procurement of materials. And then rule 5, which I guess is the most critical for her survival.
Yes, the cardinal rule of not getting caught.
They must never, ever leave a trace of her involvement. No written names, no saved phone numbers, no digital footprint.
But look at the function those rules serve for the victim. Suicidal ideation is inherently chaotic. It is overwhelming, terrifying, and messy.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Laura steps into that chaos and offers rigid organization. She essentially offers a project plan.
Wow, a project plan for death.
And for someone who is drowning in the unpredictable despair of their own mind, that kind of certainty is incredibly seductive.
It relieves them of the burden of decision-making.
Exactly. It provides unwavering direction.
You know, that makes me think of an analogy. Have you ever been to a high-end restaurant where the sommelier comes to your table?
Sure.
They don't just hand you a bottle of wine. They ask you a few subtle questions. They read your body language, look at your meal.
Right.
And then they pair you with the exact right vintage. Laura is like a twisted sommelier of death.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
She takes a vulnerable person's unique circumstances,
Yeah.
their physical limitations, their geographic location, and pairs them with the perfectly curated method of suicide.
She listens for the verbal micro-expressions of their despair.
And she does all of this for one ultimate payoff, the sound of their last breath over the phone.
Yeah.
But here's what I am struggling with. Based on all of this meticulous, cold-blooded planning, is Laura simply a psychopath who likes killing? Or does she genuinely believe she is a savior?
That is the pivotal psychological question of the entire narrative.
Right.
If we synthesize her internal monologue from the text, it's abundantly clear that she doesn't view herself as a villain. Quite the opposite.
So she thinks she's doing good.
Laura genuinely believes that society's moral compass is fundamentally flawed.
How so?
She looks at people who are trapped in the agonizing pain of terminal illness or deep depression or unmanageable debt, and she sees their existence as a miserable slog.
Okay, I see.
In her mind, the people who try to talk these victims out of dying, doctors, families, regular helpline volunteers, they are the cruel ones.
She thinks they are torturers prolonging the suffering.
Exactly. She refers to herself as the savior of lost souls. She genuinely believes she is offering the ultimate mercy.
I guess monsters are rarely born in a vacuum, right?
Very rarely.
There has to be a catalyst for that kind of worldview.
Yeah.
And the sources point to some severe trauma in her own childhood.
Yes. The compulsion to control death usually stems from a profound experience of powerlessness in the face of it.
Right.
We learn that when Laura was a child, her family died in a horrific tragedy, a tragedy that she implies her own father caused.
Oh, wow.
But the defining detail, the psychological anchor of her pathology, is that she was present. She listened to her family members take their final breaths.
That specific sound.
Yes. The auditory transition from life to death, it traumatized her, but it also became an intoxicating obsession.
It became her coping mechanism.
Exactly. If she can control that sound, if she can orchestrate it rather than be a victim of it, she regains power over her childhood trauma.
And we see that need for control bleed into her personal life too, right? Specifically with a man named Nate.
Yes. Nate is a fascinating element of her psychology. He is a homeless man suffering from HIV and tuberculosis.
And she calls him her anchor.
Yeah. They share this dark, abusive past involving a woman named Sylvia. But look at their dynamic. Nate's continual suffering feeds her pathology.
How does that work?
Well, his illnesses, his addictions, and her inability to truly cure him, it is remarkably similar to the mechanics of Munchausen syndrome by proxy.
Where a caregiver thrives on having a sick dependent.
Exactly. She couldn't control her family's death. She can't fundamentally fix Nate's life. But she can perfectly orchestrate the end for her candidates at the helpline.
Which sets the stage perfectly for what she views as her masterpiece.
The catalyst for everything.
Right. The event that sets this entire deep dive into motion. We really need to talk about David and Charlotte.
Because this is where Laura evolves from a facilitator into an active, lethal matchmaker.
Yes. Her orchestration reaches its most chilling peak here. She is no longer just managing one isolated tragedy. She is weaving them together.
So let's talk about David first.
Okay, so we have David. He is a grieving widower. His backstory is just brutal. His wife was killed in a home invasion while he was out working a night shift.
And the survivor's guilt he is carrying is paralyzing.
He is entirely consumed by it. He calls into the line, connects with Laura, and they form this intense, almost possessive emotional bond.
The text notes that Laura admits she considered keeping David alive just so she could keep talking to him on the phone.
That's wild. She was almost jealous of the purity of his grief.
She wanted to be his sole anchor, much like she is with Nate, but David presents a unique problem for her methodology.
Right, because David desperately wants to die to escape his guilt, but he is terrified of dying alone.
He lacks the final solitary nerve to cross the threshold by himself. He needs someone to hold his hand.
Which brings us to Charlotte.
Enter Charlotte.
Charlotte is a completely separate caller. She is pregnant, but she is suffering from severe, crippling prenatal depression.
Now, prenatal depression is something we don't talk about enough as a society, but it can be profoundly terrifying.
Absolutely. Charlotte is terrified of bringing a child into what she perceives to be a dangerous world. More than that, she is terrified of passing her severe mental illness onto her baby.
And Laura, sitting at her desk by the fireplace, realizes she has two perfect puzzle pieces.
She matches them together. The audacity of it is staggering.
She takes two strangers, both vulnerable but with entirely different pain points, and she unites them through their shared desperation.
I was thinking about my earlier sommelier analogy, but this is different. This is like an inverted wedding planner scenario.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to look at it.
Think about what a wedding planner does. They bring people together, they pick the venue, handle logistics, manage the pre-event jitters.
Right, so everything goes smoothly.
Laura does exactly that. She brings two total strangers together. She picks the venue. Burling Gap. which is a massive sheer chalk cliff in East Sussex.
She handles the travel logistics.
But instead of walking down an aisle to vow to live together, David and Charlotte are walking to a cliff edge to form a pact to die together.
They don't even know each other's names.
Nothing. They only know they share a mutual destiny curated by Laura.
If you want to understand the true mechanics of covert manipulation, the prologue of the book is a masterclass.
It really details this event at Burling Gap, right?
Yes. It shows exactly how Laura operates in real time under pressure. She has 2 untraceable burner phones, one pressed to each ear.
Oh, wow.
David is resolute. He is ready. But Charlotte is panicking.
Because Charlotte arrived early, she went to a cafe, got a cup of tea, and just the simple act of sitting in normalcy gave her time to think.
Her maternal instinct, the drive to protect her unborn child, begins fighting through the fog of her depression.
She actually tells Laura on the phone, I might not be doing the right thing anymore.
Now, a normal person, even someone with a twisted sense of mercy, might hear that hesitation and say, okay, that's fine, go home.
Right. The urge is past.
But how does Laura respond?
She ruthlessly weaponizes Charlotte's deepest fears. She doesn't comfort her. She attacks her vulnerability.
It's exactly the mechanics of gaslighting. Laura tells Charlotte with absolute authority, this isn't you talking, it's your hormones.
Think about how invalidating that is to a woman already questioning her sanity.
Then Laura begins to paint a vivid, horrifying picture of the future. She tells Charlotte that if she lives, she will be so heavily medicated she'll be a zombie.
She tells her she will ruin her husband's life with her constant needs.
And then, the final devastating blow, she promises Charlotte that her baby will grow up with the exact same pain, the exact same mental illness.
She tells her, your baby doesn't stand a chance in this world.
Laura identifies Charlotte's core value, her love for her unborn child, and twists it into the very weapon she uses to push her off the cliff.
She convinces Charlotte that dying is an act of supreme maternal protection. It makes you feel physically sick to read.
It really does. And then, the event happens.
Laura listens over the 2 phones. She listens to David and Charlotte meet on the gravel.
She listens to them introduce themselves only as the 2 people who are going to jump.
She listens to them hold hands. And as they step off the edge and fall over 500 feet to the rocks below, Laura is just sitting at her desk.
Biting her own lip until it bleeds.
Right, in this state of euphoric ecstasy. She is just listening to the rush of the wind and the sudden end of their final breaths.
But there is a crucial, subtle detail Mars includes in that moment that completely strips away Laura's Good Samaritan facade.
What's that?
Even as she is listening to them fall, Laura feels a sharp twinge of jealousy towards Charlotte.
Wait, really? Jealousy?
Yes. Laura wishes that she could have been the one holding David's hand as he fell.
Oh, wow. That changes everything.
It completely shatters the illusion that she's doing this purely out of mercy. It reveals her absolute detachment from the violent reality of 2 bodies hitting rocks.
She is completely immersed in her own romanticized, deeply selfish fantasy of death. She wanted the intimacy of that final moment for herself.
Exactly.
So transitioning from analyzing the predator to looking at the fallout, it's pretty jarring.
It is.
Because when 2 people jump off a cliff, the story doesn't end when they hit the bottom. The ripples of that impact spread outwards.
And they absolutely destroy the lives of the families left behind.
The collateral damage here is Charlotte's husband, Ryan Smith.
Ryan's perspective is vital to the narrative because it grounds this lofty psychological thriller in the raw, devastating reality of loss.
Ryan is just a normal guy. He's a teacher, 31 years old.
And he is entirely blindsided.
Imagine being in his shoes. You are going about your day, and the police show up at your door to tell you that your pregnant wife just jumped off a cliff hand in hand with a stranger.
And the police offer absolutely no comfort in terms of an investigation. They close the case almost immediately.
The coroner rules it a straightforward suicide pact. Case closed.
But Ryan is trapped in the aftermath. The author describes Ryan's grief not just as sadness, but as this suffocating physical bubble.
His physiological reality is altered. He can barely force himself to eat a hash brown.
He rides the public bus just to sit in the exact seat he used to share with his wife, trying to capture a ghost.
He pushes his parents away. He alienates his brother, Johnny, and Ryan explicitly admits to himself that he likes being angry.
Yes, that's a very important detail.
I'm stuck on this one detail, though. Why would someone consciously prefer anger to the process of healing?
Because anger is a tether. Grief, especially traumatic, sudden grief, is portrayed in this story as a physical, isolating room.
Okay, I'm following.
When someone you love dies so suddenly, the human brain struggles to process the finality of it. Ryan feels that if he stops being angry, if he allows the sadness to fully wash over him, he loses Charlotte entirely.
So the anger keeps his blood pumping. It keeps their memory violently present.
Exactly. But here's the psychological catch. Rage needs a target. It needs to be directed somewhere, or it turns inward.
Right. Initially, Ryan is furiously angry at Charlotte for leaving him, and he is angry at the stranger she died with.
But then he finds a new, much more potent target.
He starts digging through her things. He finds hidden, deleted files on Charlotte's laptop.
He discovers that in the weeks leading up to her death, she was communicating with someone at a suicide helpline.
Someone who is known in dark, online suicide forums by the moniker the Freer of Lost Souls.
And immediately, instantly, Ryan decides this person is a murderer.
But I have to challenge this a bit. Is Ryan actually seeking objective justice here? Or are we looking at an elaborate, desperate psychological defense mechanism?
It's a great question.
Is he hunting Laura just so he doesn't have to face the soul-crushing guilt that he missed the signs of his own wife's severe depression?
That is exactly the kind of critical question this book forces us to ask about how human beings process tragedy.
So it is a defense mechanism.
Yes, it is heavily implied that this is projection. Projection is a powerful tool for a grieving mind. Ryan absolutely admits that turning his wife's suicide into a murder investigation gives him a tangible reason to wake up in the morning.
Think about the alternative. If Charlotte just chose to jump, then Ryan has to live with the guilt of missing the signs.
He has to grapple with the fact that his love wasn't enough to save her.
But if Charlotte was manipulated, or essentially murdered, by this evil freer of lost souls, then Ryan isn't to blame.
Shirley isn't to blame either. All the guilt, all the shame can be placed squarely on the shoulders of this mysterious villain.
He needs a monster to fight, so he doesn't have to fight his own demons. It is a pure survival mechanism.
But the terrifying truth of this novel is his paranoia is entirely justified. The monster actually exists.
Right. Ryan decides he is going to find this woman. But consider the monumental task ahead of him. He doesn't know her name. He doesn't know what she looks like.
All he knows is that she volunteers somewhere in the regional network of End of the Line.
He calculates that he has roughly a 1 in 300 chance of actually getting her on the phone.
But what does he do?
He meticulously creates a persona. He becomes Stephen, a suicidal young man with no family, no friends, no ties to the world, who wants to end it all.
And then he begins to call the helpline, over and over and over again. The sheer statistical determination is staggering.
He calls 82 times. He speaks to dozens of different volunteers, night after night, giving the exact same rehearsed performance of despair.
And this sequence is brilliant because it highlights the stark contrast between the genuine volunteers who are doing the hard, noble work and Laura.
Right, because for 81 calls, Ryan gets what a caller is supposed to get.
He gets sympathy, he gets active listening, gentle attempts to de-escalate his pain.
But on the 82nd call, the dynamic shifts entirely. He gets Laura.
How does he know it's her? Out of 300 voices, how does he pinpoint the predator?
Well, because she breaks the script. She can't help herself. When Stephen gives his rehearsed sob story, Laura doesn't offer the standard comfort.
Her tone shifts. It becomes accusatory.
She pushes back, asking if this is just a cry for attention, if he's just trapped in cycles of self-pity.
Cycles of self-pity. When Ryan hears that specific phrase, a phrase he saw in Charlotte's deleted files, he reacts viscerally.
He actually throws his laptop at the wall. He instantly knows. He has found the architect of his wife's death.
The hair on the back of my neck stood up reading that realization.
Same here. So now, the mouse has found the cat. Ryan has her on the hook. And he starts stringing her along, playing right into her deep-seated need for control.
He tells her he has made a decision. He wants to hang himself.
Which is a strategically brilliant move on Ryan's part.
Because he knows from his research that she views herself as an expert. Mentioning a specific method triggers her arrogance.
She immediately shifts from helpline volunteer to morbid consultant.
She starts critiquing his methodology. She warns him that drop hangings are mathematically complicated.
She tells him the beams in an old house might not be high enough to break the neck.
That a botched attempt will lead to a slow, agonizing death by strangulation. She simply cannot resist showing off her encyclopedic knowledge of death.
She has to prove she is the smartest person in the room. And Ryan uses that arrogance to set a physical trap.
He buys a burner phone to stay untraceable.
He rents an empty derelict house in the middle of nowhere. He calls Laura and tells her the stage is set. He is ready to do it.
But then he plays his ultimate trump card.
He tells her he doesn't want to die alone. He wants her there, He wants her to watch him die in person.
And astonishingly, she takes the bait.
It is the ultimate temptation for a pathology. For years, she has been chasing the high of listening to the final breath over a static-filled phone line.
The chance to witness it intimately, in person, to be physically present for the transition from life to death. It's an intoxicating prospect she cannot refuse.
It overrides her rule of never leaving a trace.
Yeah.
So she arrives at this dark, empty house under the cover of night.
And she comes prepared.
She brings what is essentially a murder kit, a bag containing heavy-duty rope, duct tape, and a knife.
She walks into the dimly lit bedroom, expecting to find a compliant victim.
Instead, Ryan ambushes her from the shadows. He is fueled by months of pure rage. He gets her in an arm lock, forces her to drop the knife, and marches her toward the very noose he set up.
Intending to give her a taste of her own medicine.
But Laura is not a passive victim. She is a survivor. She fights back with the ferocity of a cornered animal.
She manages to break free, grabs the knife from the floor, and in the chaotic, violent struggle in the dark, Ryan stabs her in the stomach.
Bleeding, Laura manages to escape into the night, leaving Ryan standing alone in an empty house, terrified that he's just crossed the line from grieving husband to actual murderer.
The psychological whiplash for Ryan is intense. He spends the next 24 hours in an absolute panic.
He goes back to his job as a teacher, standing in front of a classroom of kids, trying to maintain this fragile facade of normalcy.
Jumping at every sound, assuming the police are about to kick down the classroom door.
And then Mars delivers one of the most brilliant, organic genre shifts I've ever seen in a thriller. The school meeting.
Oh, we have to dive deep into this twist.
Ryan is called into an impromptu meeting by the head of his year. He has a struggling 14-year-old student named Effie, whose grades have been slipping recently.
The head of the year says, "Ryan, I'd like you to meet Effie's mother to discuss her progress. She's very concerned."
The door to the brightly lit school office opens, and in walks Laura.
It is a phenomenal, breathless moment.
Just breathtaking.
Let's analyze why this works so well structurally. Up until this exact moment, we have been experiencing a psychological mystery.
A voice on a phone, a confrontation in an abandoned house in the dead of night.
It feels isolated, almost detached from the real world. But the second Ryan turns around and locks eyes with Laura, the woman he stabbed 12 hours earlier, the anonymity is completely violently stripped away.
In a perfectly normal school office surrounded by educational posters.
The genre pivots sharply. We move from an anonymous thriller into a tense, claustrophobic domestic thriller.
The danger isn't lurking in a dark alley anymore. It is sitting across the desk in Ryan's workplace, and it is intimately connected to his professional life and her family life.
The boundaries have collapsed.
The hunter and the prey are suddenly forced to interact within the strict, polite confines of society. Imagine the tension.
Ryan is sitting there, in his teacher's attire, trying to discuss a teenager's homework assignments.
While staring at a woman who has a stab wound he inflicted hidden under her blouse. A woman who is also the architect of his pregnant wife's death.
And Laura, sitting there playing the concerned mother, suddenly realizes the man who tried to hang her is her daughter's history teacher.
And what's crucial here is how they both immediately use the setting to their advantage. They can't scream at each other. They have to communicate in code.
Ryan uses Laura's own specific vocabulary against her in the meeting.
Right. When discussing Effie's grades, he casually mentions to Laura that Effie seems trapped in cycles of self-pity.
It's a brilliant tactical move. He is letting her know exactly who he is and exactly why he hunted her without ever breaking the professional facade of the meeting.
But if Ryan thinks he has the upper hand because he knows her identity, he has vastly underestimated his opponent.
Oh, completely. Because once Laura's real identity is exposed, she doesn't do what a normal criminal would do.
She doesn't run away. She didn't go into hiding or destroy her files.
That assumes she operates with a normal human sense of fear or guilt. Instead, because her narcissism is so deeply tied to her sense of total control, being discovered actually triggers her to go on the offensive.
She counterattacks with terrifying speed and ruthlessness.
Yeah.
She utilizes the exact same manipulation tactics she uses on the phone, but applies them to dismantle Ryan's actual daily life.
Let's examine her tactics because they are textbook examples of predatory gaslighting applied to a domestic setting.
The most shocking boundary she crosses is what she does to her own 14-year-old daughter.
Laura realizes Ryan is an existential threat to her freedom, so she decides the most efficient way to neutralize him is to destroy his reputation.
She begins to subtly groom Effie into believing that Ryan's concern for her grades is actually predatory, inappropriate behavior.
And the way she does it is insidious. She doesn't just tell Effie, your teacher is a creep. She plants seeds.
She asks Evie leading questions over dinner. He told you to keep secrets from us, didn't he? He wants you to stay after class alone.
And when Effie hesitates, Laura swoops in with the authoritative voice of a professional. She says, that's a fairly typical approach to grooming a child.
She uses her fake expertise from the helpline to convince her own daughter that she is in danger. And it works perfectly.
Effie reports Ryan. Ryan is suspended from his teaching job immediately pending an investigation.
His career is halted. His reputation in the community is in ruins. I was thinking about this like a sociopathic game of chess.
It really is.
Laura is perfectly willing to sacrifice her own pieces, her daughter's innocence, her trust in male authority figures, just to trap Ryan's king.
It demonstrates her absolute chilling lack of moral boundaries when her survival is threatened.
A normal parent's primary instinct is to protect their child from trauma.
Laura utilizes trauma as a weapon. And Ryan, who is already mentally unstable from his immense unprocessed grief, realizes he is losing the war.
He begins to retaliate desperately. But here is the key difference. Ryan's retaliations are sloppy, emotional, and impulsive.
Whereas Laura's are coldly calculated.
Exactly. Ryan's grip on sanity starts slipping. He sneaks into the residential care home where Laura's sick father is living.
He finds a framed wedding photo of himself and Charlotte there.
A photo Laura had stolen from his home and placed in her father's room as a sick, mocking trophy. Ryan defaces Laura's image in the room.
It's an emotional outburst, not a strategic one.
Then things get deeply disturbing. Ryan's brother, Johnny, who has been trying to support Ryan, goes to Ryan's flat to check on him.
Johnny walks in and finds something horrific.
Someone has broken in. They took Charlotte's pristine white wedding dress out of storage, laid it out perfectly on the bed, covered it in blood, and placed a dead, bloody fetus of a piglet squarely on the stomach of the dress.
Which is a highly symbolic, grotesque mockery of Charlotte's pregnancy and her violent death.
Now, Ryan insists to his brother that Laura must have broken in and done this to terrorize him. But put yourself in Johnny's shoes.
Right. Johnny doesn't know about the secret helpline conspiracy.
Johnny looks at the situation and begins to severely doubt his own brother's sanity.
Johnny points out the facts. Ryan has been spiraling. Ryan has admitted to tracking down a strange woman, trying to hang her and stabbing her.
From the outside perspective, Ryan doesn't look like a hero seeking justice. He looks like a violent, grieving man who is completely losing his mind and perhaps defacing his own wife's memory in a psychotic break.
Laura's strategy is working perfectly. She is successfully isolating Ryan from his only remaining support system.
And then the violence escalates fatally. Ryan's brother, Johnny, decides he's had enough of the madness.
He wants answers. He decides to go to Laura's house late at night to confront her directly.
Laura's looking out the window. She sees Johnny approaching the house in the dark. But instead of locking the doors and calling the police like a normal person, she sees an opportunity.
She sees a way to eliminate a threat permanently without getting her own hands dirty.
She weaponizes her own husband, Tony. This is perhaps the most chilling, visceral scene in the entire book.
Laura runs into the bedroom to Tony in a state of manufactured, hysterical panic.
She screams that the pervert teacher, the man she is convinced Tony is grooming their daughter, has broken into their home and is currently upstairs attacking their severely disabled, nonverbal son, Henry.
Consider the psychology of weaponized instinct. Tony is a former boxer. He is fiercely protective of his family.
When a father is violently woken up and told that a known predator is currently attacking his highly vulnerable child, cognitive reasoning completely shuts down.
Primal instinct takes over. Tony charges into the darkened room, completely blind with rage and adrenaline, and he beats the intruder to death with his bare hands.
He doesn't stop to ask questions. He just destroys the threat to his child. But the devastating twist.
When the dust settles, Tony rolls the bloody body over. He realizes he hasn't killed Ryan.
He has beaten Ryan's brother, Johnny, to death. An innocent man.
And here's where we see the absolute terrifying adaptability of a psychopath. Tony is standing there in the dark, shaking with uncontrollable horror, his hands covered in an innocent man's blood.
He is a broken man, realizing his life is over. And Laura doesn't miss a beat.
She feels no remorse for Johnny and no pity for her husband. She calmly steps over the body, looks Tony in the eye, and begins coaching him.
She says, "Look at me. Listen to me very carefully. I will tell the police exactly what Ryan's brother was trying to do when he broke in.
I won't let anything happen to you. In a matter of seconds, she rewrites the entire narrative to claim a justifiable self-defense.
effectively turning her own husband into a murderer to serve her ends. She binds Tony to her forever through shared guilt and complicity. It's monstrous.
The sheer manipulation is awe-inspiring in the darkest way possible. The war of attrition between Ryan and Laura reaches its climax.
But if you, the listener, are waiting for that typical Hollywood moment where good triumphs over evil, where the police burst in and slap handcuffs on the villain, you are going to be waiting a long time.
John Mars does not write fairy tales.
No, he doesn't. This narrative utterly subverts our cultural expectations of justice. Thrillers usually promise us that order will be restored.
Mars promises us that chaos often wins.
Because Laura is not done, she takes it one step further to secure her victory. Her boss at the helpline, Janine, has started to notice inconsistencies.
Janine is starting to suspect Laura might be involved in some shady practices.
Adding a layer of domestic betrayal, Janine was also having a secret affair with Tony, Laura's husband. So Laura decides to kill two birds with one stone.
She brutally murders Janine in her office with a hammer. It is a messy, violent, up-close murder.
And then she meticulously plants evidence, including forging Ryan's name in Janine's appointment diary to ensure that the police will view Ryan as the prime, undeniable suspect.
And this final act of framing breaks Ryan completely.
He is utterly defeated. Think about the cascading horror of what he has lost in the span of a few months. He has lost his wife, Charlotte. He lost his unborn child.
He lost his career and reputation. He lost his brother, Johnny, in a senseless act of violence. His own parents doubt his sanity.
And now his freedom is about to be taken away for a gruesome murder he didn't commit. He is totally cornered.
Ryan has this crushing, profound realization. He cannot beat Laura.
Why? Because she possesses absolutely no moral boundaries. He is fighting someone who will use any weapon, sacrifice anyone, and cross any line to win.
You cannot beat an opponent who isn't playing by the same rules of humanity.
Ryan realizes that the only way to end the game, the only way to escape the torturous maze she has trapped him in, is to remove himself from the board entirely.
Which leads to an incredibly emotional, illustrative scene.
Ryan evades the police and drives out to Berlin Gap, the exact same chalk cliff where Charlotte died. He climbs over the safety fence.
And in his final moments, standing on the edge, looking down at the churning water 500 feet below, something profound happens.
For months, his driving force has been anger at Charlotte for leaving him. But now, facing a world that is completely unmanageable, facing emotional pain that is immense and suffocating, he finally understands his wife.
He realizes that for someone in true, absolute despair, jumping isn't an act of selfishness, as society so often labels it.
To him, in that moment, it feels like the only logical option left to find peace. He apologizes to Charlotte aloud into the wind.
He imagines holding her hand and holding his unborn son's hand, and he leans forward and lets himself fall.
It is a devastatingly bleak conclusion for his character arc. He started out seeking justice, seeking to avenge his love, but the obsessive pursuit of vengeance essentially dug his own grave.
It forces us to pause and reflect on how we view suicidal ideation. Often, from the outside, it is judged harshly. This narrative forces the reader to inhabit that unbearable weight of pain, to the point where the listener can empathize with Ryan's final, tragic choice.
And the chilling conclusion of the book, Laura wins. Completely, absolutely, and unequivocally.
With Janine dead and Ryan gone, taking the blame for all the violence the public rallies around the end of the line helpline.
The community is outraged by the murders Ryan supposedly committed. Over £100,000 is donated in Janine's memory.
And Laura. Laura is promoted to the manager of the helpline. She inherits the kingdom.
The final image we have of her is at a press event, posing for a photo with the town mayor, smiling for the cameras as she unveils a commemorative plaque.
This ending is entirely intentional on the author's part. It is designed to force the reader to sit with profound, lingering discomfort.
It deliberately denies us catharsis.
Instead, Laura's absolute victory proves a terrifying reality about our world. Highly manipulative, psychopathic individuals can and do thrive in society.
Particularly when they learn to hide their pathology behind a veneer of charity, altruism, and maternal care.
In her internal monologue at the very end, she reflects proudly on her actions. She feels no guilt. She still truly views herself as a hero, a good Samaritan.
It literally makes your skin crawl. So let's summarize the dark, winding journey we've taken today. We traced a line from the supposed safety and quiet intimacy of a dark phone booth at a charity helpline, all the way to the devastating total destruction of an entire family.
We watched a grieving husband be pushed to the brink of madness and beyond.
And every single domino in that chain of destruction was pushed by a woman who genuinely believed she was helping.
It highlights a very terrifying systemic vulnerability in our society. We place an enormous amount of implicit, unquestioning trust in caregivers, in volunteers, in medical professionals, and authority figures.
We assume, because it is necessary for a functioning society to assume, that those who offer help are doing so out of the goodness of their hearts.
This story asks us to bravely confront the horror of what happens when that implicit trust is weaponized against the most fragile among us.
Exactly. Consider your own life. You probably interact with helpers all the time. Teachers, nurses, volunteers, therapists.
We rely on them. We bare our souls to them.
To think that someone could use that sacred position not to heal, but to hunt, it fundamentally changes how you look at the world and the people offering you a hand.
And that leads to a final lingering thought I want to leave with the listener to ponder long after this deep dive ends. As human beings, we are evolutionarily conditioned to easily recognize villains who act out of overt malice or greed or blind rage.
We know what a threat looks like. We know to run from the man with a gun or the person screaming in the street.
But how do you protect yourself from a monster whose horrific actions are driven by a genuine, deeply held belief that they are doing you a favor?
Think about the dynamics in your own life, your own workplace, your own family. Who uses the phrase, "I'm only trying to help you," not as an offer of support, but as a clever disguise for controlling you?
The terrifying thought to leave on? Keep your eyes open and always trust your instincts.